Okay, we've already got a good group here. We're going to start right on time, right here on the hour, and we're really looking forward to this expert chats today. So we've got Greg Daines, who is the CEO and founder of Churn RX. We'll be talking through talking through this with Selina. We're super excited for this session, and we want to jump right in and not waste any time. So I'm going to turn the reins over to Greg to kick things off.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Looking forward to this for a long time. Actually, we worked with Selina for a very long time, blown away by what she is and what she does, and just think this is going to be incredibly useful and informative for everybody. So maybe a quick intro, Selina, if you don't mind. I'll give a little bit of your background, and then I do want to talk a little bit about how you came into where you took over CS, but just your background. Selina went to MIT. And then broke into the digital marketing world during that early Google heyday period, first as a CEO, then or COO, then CEO. She built her first digital marketing venture into one of the biggest agencies like it of its kind, and was an Ad Age top 10 agency, actually. And then had a successful exit after 15 years there. She moved to Conductor, where we worked with her, a SaaS-based marketing technology company, and she ran operations and customer success. And among other things, she helped Conductor navigate their acquisition by WeWork, and then the subsequent dissolution of that, and then spearheaded both Conductor's buyback from WeWork, as well as an $150 million investment partnership with SageMount and others, and really was instrumental in bringing Conductor's value up to like 500 million. Her career has just been amazing to watch. I've learned a ton from her, but with all that, she's proudest of her three beautiful children and 4 New York City triathlons. Wow. This is the kind of experience it is to work with Selina. So with that, the one warning I have is, if you see her in your 5 a.m. Peloton class, pedal faster, because she's probably on your tail, actually. So anyway, welcome, Selina. Love having you. Love this chance to talk about what you've done in customer success in particular.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. Well, and I know you've taken made a shift in your career recently as well. You're no longer at Conductor, but there was so much you did there, and I really want to kind of go back through that and other experiences you have that have led you to have so many different, I think, really interesting perspectives. So one of the things that happened was that in the process of doing all the things you were spearheading at Conductor, you were also given the responsibility over the whole customer success piece, among other things that you were running. And I'm interested. I think it's intriguing for a lot of people who've had a career path that led them to customer success kind of unexpectedly. In fact, I think that's most leaders in customer success sort of didn't you study that or prepare for that, but sort of ended up there. And it's not surprising, because it's a really challenging part of the business. But anyway, I'm curious about, what was your experience coming from where you had been and all the things you've done into that particular role, which was one of many, but what was it like taking over that?
So first, I am really grateful to be talking about customer success, which is definitely near and dear to me. It was probably one of the highlights of my career. I absolutely loved the team that I was working with at Conductor. Just very empathetic and super smart, passionate people. And I think for me, customer success was just incredibly challenging. As you said, it's one of the challenging parts of the business, but also just very rewarding. I won't talk too much about myself, but I've been in digital marketing, but most of my career and my roles have really been very customer facing. So I started the client experience team at Bing Ad Center back in the day when Ad Center came out. And then I ran the agency for 15 years, very hands-on, very much customer facing. And the way I kind of got into running the team at Conductor was, we used to have weekly meetings with our CEO and actually board advisor, Ron Kastner, who very brilliant guy. And we would always talk about the operational challenges in the business. And for us, it was about how do we scale and get really efficient. And naturally, customer success was like the hottest topic, right? Because you want to reduce churn, but you also want to do so efficiently. And sometimes those things are at odds with each other. And one day in this conversation, he kind of looked at me and he's like, I mean, really, you should be running this. I mean, you're clearly so passionate about it. And, right now, this is where we need to focus. And we just have to fix the leaky bucket. That's what we've got to figure out. And so you should just do this problem, like fix this one thing. And he knows I'm this, like, I like to be this problem solver. So I said, okay, I'm going to try to do that. And so I just made it my mission to find a way to reduce churn and run CS efficiently. And that's kind of how I got into it.
Well, the efficiency part, I mean, that's interesting. I think a lot of, my own pathway brought me into customer success, not through the same circumstances, but largely for the exact same reason, which is this is a really complicated, interesting challenge, not least of which is because you can't just throw endless resources at it, right?
Yeah.
You actually have to figure out how to do it economically on some level. And that's actually one of the things that I think has continued to make it a compelling and interesting challenge. Because at least on one side, we can think, well, we'll just throw more people at it. Well, we never get to do that. We can never do that, right? It's not even clear to me that that would work anyway, but we certainly don't have that option. And so I'm interested in, that aspect. You mentioned it needs to be done efficiently. As you took over, as you first engaged with it, what was your approach? What were you thinking as you sort of grabbed onto it and started to look into what how you were going to approach it?
Yeah, I think for us, I'll kind of start with the initial challenges that we had or what we perceived it to be. But we were very reactive basically all of the time, right? Our team was feeling very exhausted and overwhelmed by putting out fires and saving customers. And and that's when typically the executives get called in, right? Because you're called in to go save or help this issue. And that's where I would get involved. And it makes sense, that you would be so responsive to customers because that's your role, right? Is to make sure that the needs are being met. And, I think when you're doing that, you react. And this is something you had always told us, you react to every situation, right? If a customer stops using the platform, you react. If they get upset or complain, you react. And you come in this vicious reactive cycle of pleasing customers. And that was really the problem we were trying to solve for. And I think what everyone felt the solution was, right? Everyone else was like, we just have to hire more people. And when we would talk to our board, they're like, no, you can't hire more people. That's not, there's a problem here, and it's not hiring people that's going to fix this problem. And, I think you had always put CSMs into these personas, right? There's the pleaser persona, and that's the CSM that wants to please your customers. And we had a whole team of those, Greg. We had a whole team of pleasers. That's what they felt their job was. And, we also actually had a whole team that were heroes, that you would call the heroes, that would save the customer, and a whole team that would do that. And it was exhausting. And it's exhausting to the team because you don't win at that all the time, right? You feel like a failure a lot of the time because you can't save a customer who's already failed. And that was probably the emotional part that the team was going through that I was kind of walking into. And I think, whenever you kind of take on a new role, you listen to what everyone is saying, and you heard it in the voices of everybody. We're tired. There's too much. It's almost impossible to do this for all these customers. And so there's no way for us to get efficient. We just need more people to please the customers. And so that's kind of what I came into. There's actually, it's interesting because there was one CS leader who would, his very smart guy, his name was Pat Reinhardt. He would always say, I wish that every day we could surprise and delight our customers. And the problem is when you're putting out fires, you can't do the great stuff, right? You can't surprise and delight your customers. But he was right in that that's what you want to be doing. You want to do the things that are going to lead to results. But yeah, that's kind of how we got into it, and that's kind of what we were dealing with.
Yeah, so you come into it, you're hearing this exhaustion, which is I'm sure the people on here are feeling this because in a sense it's universal. I haven't been anywhere within the world of customer success where people aren't expressing some of this fatigue and frustration too, because that's the other thing about being highly reactive is the customers are telling us to be reactive. They're encouraging that behavior, and yet when we supply it, it doesn't always seem to make them satisfied. It doesn't always lead to the successful outcome.
They just want more.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. And then there's this question of, well, are they asking me for the thing that would be best for them? I don't know. They're just saying it would be, right? And gosh, that can be really frustrating. So you get this malaise out there. When you take over a new CS team, I think that's one of the most universal experiences that a new leader has, which is they're going to seek feedback. And that's one of the top things they're going to get back, which is we're kind of exhausted and we need more resources. But it's also understandable why they would demand resources, because in the absence of a clear alternative process, right, that's what they have. So I think they can be forgiven for looking to that as the way to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So okay, we can't just do that. What did you do next? How did you dig into that after that initial phase? Where did you look?
I will say I'm embarrassed to say this now because I know you, Greg, but I'll explain why I'm embarrassed. But the question I was really trying to figure out, right, is why do customers churn? Because if I could just figure out why they churned, right, we could fix that problem and the churn should diminish. I mean, before I had started, we had hired a company to do this, and they would interview our churned customers. And honestly, they would give us information and the team would say, oh, we tried to fix that, but nothing would really help. So what I ended up doing is I said, listen, maybe this company we hired wasn't great. I am going to do the interviews myself. So I literally said, I'm going to go interview them. So I interviewed churn customers and I talked to a bunch of churn customers, and I would get the breakup conversation. Like it wasn't you. It was us.
Yes.
We weren't able to do the things. We weren't ready for what you guys could do. And I would get that a lot. Like they loved our team. They only had wonderful things to say about our team. And I know our CEO kept asking me, what are you getting out of these conversations? And I would have to keep going back being like, nothing. I am getting nothing out of these conversations. I'm getting no more than this other company we had hired to do it. And I was really getting nowhere. So so this is why I say I'm embarrassed that I was asking that question. I was getting ready to go into a meeting that we had with our executive team, and it was on Mondays. And in that meeting, I was going to share all the feedback that I had gotten from these churn customer conversations. And honestly, I mean, I came up with all these factors of churn. I had a whole list of all these things, and I prioritized and said which ones we were going to focus on first. And it was Saturday morning, and it didn't feel right about the stuff I had gotten ready for the meeting on Monday. And I was on my Peloton bike, which I normally am, and I usually have a desk in front of me. I remember this moment. And I on Saturdays, I tend to research things, and I'm just trying to get educated in different things. So I start researching on YouTube, the right ways to do surveys. Because I thought, you know what, I'm going to go in with all these reasons, but people are going to ask me, did you survey right? Did you ask the right questions, right? So I started researching on YouTube, and I found this video of you, Greg, and the video was called one question that will transform your customer success strategy. And you go on to say, and the first like 50 seconds of it, you're basically saying, it's so important that if you manage anything, you get the questions right. And so often we get the questions wrong. And you put up this slide and it said the wrong questions. And the first question was, why do customers buy? And the second question, not making this up to anyone listening to this, but the second question was like, why do customers leave? So I am naturally so intrigued because you're basically saying that everything I've been doing for the last few months, I'm asking the wrong question. So it really hit home. I'm very intrigued. I keep watching. And you said that, most of the time we try to answer these questions, we survey our customers, exactly what we had done, and we get all these reasons, right? And then we try to fix these reasons, right? And we go through each one of them and we fix them and these main themes. And then, we think our churn is going to get better, but we're kind of surprised the churn doesn't get remarkably better. And what you said actually really resonated is you said, hey, there's a lot of reasons for churn, a lot of reasons, but there's not that many reasons for why customers stay. And so you had said the right question to actually ask is, why do customers stay? And that profoundly changed the way I thought about everything. And from there on, I kind of did totally different things than what I think my initial sense was to do.
Interesting. Well, it's funny too, because you mentioned that this idea that there's this leaky bucket we have to plug the hole. It's so intuitive. It makes so much sense that I actually think that the metaphor itself is problematic because it implies there's a hole somewhere. And if we plug the hole, they'll stay in.
Exactly.
But the truth is we don't have a hole. We have an exit door. There's a big exit door. And it's not like we can lock the door and seal people inside. We have an exit door. The question is, why don't they exit, right? And we're not going to plug the hole. The hole exists. People can leave. It's actually one of the great benefits of the SaaS revolution, in my view, is that it makes it easier for people to find the fit that works for them. And that means leaving if the fit isn't great. So the question isn't, how do we seal the exit? The question is, why do those who stay? What's causing that?
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. And so, all right, so that shifted your thinking. Where did you go from there? Like, what's the next step? If being, well, and here's the other thing I did want to mention, when you do those surveys, the interesting thing that always comes out of it, and I know because I've done them a bunch of times, is how many different answers you get.
Yeah, so many.
Right. And it's kind of, and it's sort of popular right now, actually, to talk about what are all of the standard reasons customers exit. And it's really difficult to come up with a standardized list. And everyone who's trying, I think, is struggling, partly because there are so many reasons customers will give you. There are hundreds. And what we do is we try to kind of put them in groups and say, well, that's sort of like this one. And then we'll get them down to, I don't know, 25 or something. But customers don't leave for 25 reasons, right? They leave kind of for one reason, which is the thing isn't producing the value we needed it to produce. And
which is actually the biggest thing I learned is when I thought about it, and you had said the primary reason for churn is because a customer is not achieving or perceiving that measured value and that measured result. And when I thought about it, I couldn't think of one customer who had left that was getting results. They weren't. So that was the one common theme between everything. And that was probably true of all of our customers. And I think the other thing that you had said that resonated with me is the cardinal sin of CS is unexpected churn. And I had been hearing this in a few different ways too. We had actually just hired a new CRO, Tom Martin, who very smart SaaS guy, had a lot of SaaS experience. And one thing he said to me when I came on in the role, and he was also new at the company as well, he had said, the one thing you can do is get your forecast right. You should know when a customer is going to churn and when they're not. This is the most important thing you can do. And I really sat with that, and it made me realize that, hey, if we knew, right, that you were going to churn and we knew early enough, we could actually fix it. It's not like fighting a fire, right? I could just turn off the stove now because I know it's on. It was so much, it made a lot more sense if you're trying to prevent churn that you have to predict it first. And the other thing is we had, the board advisor I had mentioned, Ron Kastner, he had said right when I came in the role, I want you to go for the next year to every single customer on this list. And I want you to tell me who's going to stay and who is going to go. And I'm thinking, I got to do that customer by customer. He's like, yeah, create a bottoms up model and tell us which ones are going to, because that will signify that you understand what's going on with the customer base. So I was thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have to talk to every CSM about every customer and figure out if that's going to happen. So I knew that this was an important initiative, is to really predict churn early.
That's so interesting. What a perceptive thought process, in my opinion, from your board member, because in a sense, what you're doing now is shifting to the opposite approach. If the approach was why do customers leave, you talk to customers who leave. If the approach is why do customers stay, you talk to customers that are staying.
Yep.
Now, in a sense, your board member was framing it slightly differently than that, but these are not leaving customers. These are customers who are here. And the question is, what are the dynamics that matter? So, man, this is something that for me, it was a real career transformative moment. It was when I said, I don't really know why customers stay. I have to admit it. I don't know. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to go watch them. I'm just going to go somewhere where I know a customer is really successful and find out why, and why is that working for them. And so I would go sit there. Some of them would let me. It was like, do you mind if I just come? Well, of course you can come on site. You're our vendor rep. We appreciate the attention, but I was really there to learn from them. And I would just sit there and say, hey, why are you doing it that way? Well, we found this works better because blah, blah, blah. Oh, that's interesting. Mental note. Hey, why do you guys do it? I've not seen my other customers do it this way. Why are you doing it that way? Man, did I learn a ton. So I'm curious about this tour. Did you physically went to these clients and what was the insight? Like how did that change your view?
You know what we did? We did the success analysis with you, where we actually went to successful customers and we investigated the things they did. And they often don't know they don't realize like this was your turning moment, right? But when you investigate, you start to figure that out. And, interestingly enough, it wasn't a lot of things, right? It was a few things, right, that they did. And it wasn't things that they did in the product, right? Because you can't just turn on the product and get results. You had to do something. There was a behavioral change. So we knew we were looking for these behavioral things that some customers did and other customers didn't. And that was one really big thing that we did. And then the other big thing that we did from, studying these customers is and identifying those critical behaviors is we actually would track them. We tracked if a customer wasn't doing them. And that was a big process change that we made, and we called it red accounts. And these weren't red accounts as in they're on fire. I should call them pink accounts, but they weren't on fire, right? They were it was understanding that a customer could fail. They have made the wrong turn and we need to just get them back on the right track. So we would identify when that happened. And from having those behaviors and then tracking this for customers, we were able to build out an entire model. This model that board advisor had told me to do, this bottoms up model to tell you if a customer would churn or not. And we could tell you with almost like precision, we were able to tell you. The accuracy was just phenomenal. We could tell you if a customer was going to churn or not. And I think that was one of the best things that we did. And, the example I'll give for conductor of one of these behaviors. And again, these behaviors will seem very intuitive to you when you spot them. But the one of the behaviors that we found is conductor is essentially, the goal of using conductor is to increase your revenue from organic marketing. That's what most customers are trying to do. They're trying to get more from their organic marketing program. And what we found is the successful customers, they had very good relationships with their web team, because to have successful results in organic marketing, you have to make changes to your website. And the customers who were able to make those changes had good relationships with their web team. They were able to make those changes and they had successful results. And we knew that. We knew you had to be able to make changes to your website. It's not like it was, great insight. Great, we know that. But the reality is we had a lot of customers who couldn't do that, had no influence over the website. And so eventually there's no way you can get success if you couldn't do this. So we kind of took that as a critical behavior that we had to track. Can you touch your website or not? Because if we know in the beginning that you can't, we can help you. We can intervene. It's not a fire anymore. There's not, we don't, it's not going to, you haven't gone down the right, the wrong hole and we can't come fix you. So that was, I think, really important for us.
Gosh, that's so interesting. And it's such a great example. Can I dig on it just a little bit? Because, well, there's a number of things you said. One of the things you said is that if you just ask a customer what they did right, they're not always actually very aware of the things they're doing right. Sometimes it's because they've just worked at that company and this is the way we do things. They don't realize how different it is than other companies. Yeah. But also, and more commonly in my experience, it's because they don't see the direct connection between those two things. They take for granted that they have a relationship with the web team. Doesn't everybody? Yeah. Right? No, actually, not everybody. Doesn't everyone
have a meeting every single week to make changes on your web? No.
No, and so it's not conceivable to them that they should be aware that's the key to their success, right? And so what happens, and this is the slight challenge when you shift from asking failed customers why they leave to successful customers why they stay. You just ask them, they'll come up with an answer, but it won't necessarily. So one thing you said, which I think absolutely needs to be highlighted, which is that you studied customers. You didn't survey customers, you studied them. And that involves talking to them, but it involves looking more deeply, right? Because very frequently it's a simple thing like, well, we have clients who struggle to get their web team to engage and make key changes. And those are operative. You don't get results without those changes. So it's like, oh, okay, well, we knew that. When this is the other thing that you said, I want to just highlight, which is when you kind of pick out one of these things and you realize it's one of those core behavior changes that's driving success, very frequently you're like, well, obviously, that's your reaction. But that's the point. It's so obvious. Yeah. We weren't working on it. We weren't putting it at the center. We weren't making it operative. And so that's the other thing is I doubt you'll ever find one and go, that's a shock. That's why they're successful. No, that's not the reaction. It's like, well, that's obvious. Yeah. Were you taking it for granted as a vendor that all your customers were able to do that and were getting it done? You see, that's the interesting thing. So anyway, really, really interesting example. So, okay, so you find this thing. It has one other element in your story that I want to ask you to dwell on a little bit more, but that is, it's a leading indicator. It's something that you can find out long before, if you're looking, long before the account goes south, right? And so you can actually say, well, here's a thing that's not happening or is key to success. And, if nothing changes, they'll eventually churn. I don't know whether it'll be next quarter or a year from now, but they'll churn because they can't get results without it. And why would they stay long-term if they can't? Okay, so great. Now we have a leading indicator of risk. A lot of our indicators of risk are lagging. Like they stop using it or they start telling us they're shopping for competitors. That means it's already over, right? Can you save it? Most of the time you can't, no matter what you do. So I'm interested because this seems to be part of the insight your board member brought to the table, which is that if you could predict it, that means you understand it. And people ask me, well, why is unexpected churn more serious than actual churn? And it's because it's the indicator that you understand what's there, and then you can operate on it. Okay, so you did that, you found this thing, and you could go operate on it. How did your people take that? I mean, here you've got all these pleasers or heroes, and they're used to reacting. Now you say, hey, look, we're going to be proactive. We're going to get ahead of all this based on this signal that we've identified. And you actually came up with several. It wasn't just that one, but that was a great example. How did your people react? Like, what was it like to take that to your team and shift their mentality?
Before I answer that, I want to tell you one other thing that we did, because I think it's the two things coupled that that led to their reaction. So the second process change that we made was, on the side of helping customers get measurable results. So it wasn't just like tracking and flagging these things. We often, customers just don't know how to get success, right? Again, it seems intuitive, like you should have a meeting with your web team. They don't realize, oh, well, I really should set this up on a cadence and do it. They don't know. I have a great example of something I've been using this product, and it's super simple to understand. So I'll give this as the example, but I use this email client. It's a new program. It's called Superhuman. And the goal of anyone using this is to get to an inbox of 0. It just cleans out your inbox. Okay. Now, I love the product. It's great for a busy, very organized person. Like, I love to have this clean inbox. That means I've addressed everything. So love the product. The CSMs are great. They're very responsive. They give me tips proactively. They give me tips on things I could do. Now, I don't always get to an inbox of 0. I keep trying, but I don't always get to an inbox of 0. But wouldn't it be nice if they would just tell me what behaviors their successful customers do who get to an inbox of 0 every single day? Wouldn't it be nice? I'm sure if they looked at all their customers, they could, all their successful customers who are getting to that 0 inbox, if they just looked at a few of them, right, and pulled out the behaviors. Like, maybe it's like I set up a 10-minute meeting in the morning and a 10-minute at 6 p.m. But when I do that, I get to my inbox of 0 3 or 4 times a week, right? If they could just tell me that, I would want to know, right? I don't know the behaviors. I may know how to use their platform, but I don't know the behaviors. So what we would do is the process change we made is would start at sales, right? Is we would make sure that the sales team would, and sales teams, very good sales teams will always do this. And our sales team was great. They would very much collect the goals that the customer was trying to achieve. They would get those goals and they would map out the technology solution to those goals. Now, once the customer was a customer and moved to the customer success team, right, we would actually validate those goals. We would say, is this realistic? We want to make sure that you can actually achieve that. We don't want you to set unrealistic goals. But then we would also map the behaviors. So we call those key solutions. It would be your technology solution, which the sales team has mapped out, right? But also the things that you need to do, customer, to be successful, right? So it was the behavioral solutions that need to happen, all those process changes. So we would map that out in the beginning, and then we would track that all the time with customers, right? At QBRs, we would go back through that and make sure, are you following this? Are you doing this? So we were just really tight on that, on the goal setting process and following through with the customer on that. And I think that was really, really important. So, to your question of how did everyone react to doing this? Well, first of all, when you are dealing with people and changing essentially their roles and responsibilities, that is very hard. And I'm not going to lie, it is very hard, because if you take it from their perspective, they are hired to do this role with these certain responsibilities. And now we're saying, hey, you're not going to use the fireman playbook anymore. I don't need you to do that. I want you to go forget that one. We can't save it. I want you to go and look at your customer base and tell me who is a red account now, who is, an account that could have a really, could churn in the future. I want you to do that now. And then I want you to just go I just want you to go teach the customer how to be better in these 3 critical behaviors. It's hard because you're a pleaser. Then you have to say no to your customer. And for a pleaser, that's your habit. You are born, if you're in customer, I've been in customer success, or customer service, right, for a long time, that saying no is even challenging for me. It's so hard. So what we did, and what you guys helped us to do, is to teach them how to understand when a customer is asking to something. It doesn't mean you don't do it, but you have to understand if it's something that's going to get them to the result. And if it's not, you need to tell them that this is not going to get you to the result. And it was definitely very difficult for us. It's just you're changing someone's habits. But we got there slowly but surely. We got there. And I think I wish we had, it's either you pull the Band-Aid off fast or you do it slowly. We kind of did it slowly, person by person. I kind of wish we just ripped off the Band-Aid, because then it honestly would have gone faster. But it's hard. It's hard to change people's roles and hard to change habits.
It is so much, especially because the thing you're asking them to move away from, it's just so intuitively feels right?
Yeah.
Who am I to say the customer isn't doing the right thing for them, right? It just feels like such an imposition. But it's fascinating too, though, because, and I remember this in the case of your team, but it's something we see every time we engage with a team like yours, which is that when they even dip their toe in the water to try something like you just said, something scary, where I say, hey, customer, I know you think that's a really valuable move. Can I just tell you, based on our experience, this other thing will work better and get you there faster? People are shocked to discover how much the customer appreciates it.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, I thought I was appreciated because I would say yes. But when I challenge an idea you have, which we can all do diplomatically, the one thing about CS people is they're so diplomatic.
Yeah.
They're so high functioning in terms of social communication style, et cetera, which is great, by the way, because if they weren't, this could go a very different way. But they tend to be very good at that. And they'll say something very diplomatic like, hey, you could do that. Our experience says this other thing will work better. It's amazing. Customers immediately, and I remember this with your customers, immediately said, oh, I didn't know that. Well, that's actually good to know. Thank you for sharing that. People are shocked. And so when you say rip the Band-Aid off, one of the reasons why I think that is smart is because the sooner they have a few of those experiences, the sooner they realize why you're asking them.
Any one of them who adopted it quickly and started doing it, were all like, this is working, this is working, this is working. It just,
right.
It's hard to just get your mindset into it. But when you do it, then you realize that this is going to work.
Yeah, it's a shocker too, because amongst the CS world, there's this feeling that, and I remember having it myself so strongly. So I completely relate and empathize with this view. But it's like, if I challenge my customer, they're going to think of me as an enemy, as a rival, in a negative way, and they're going to not look forward to talking to me. I'm afraid of that, right? But that's not what happens. It's almost the exact opposite that happens, because now they're like, oh, wow, when I talk to that person, they share things I didn't know before, and that's really useful because we actually don't know what we're doing. We don't appreciate, I think, sometimes how much our customers are looking for a better way to do something, not just a new software platform to do it. Yeah. Right. And when they get that, so it's like your example with your new email program. If they would just tell me what the better way to do it is, not just the better tool, then I feel like I would get even more value out of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the one thing I would say for any leaders in the CS org is that you have to just keep reiterating the why, right? You just have to keep going back saying you're doing this to get better results for your customers. And you just have to keep repeating it. Even if you sound like a broken record. I know I sounded like that. I would go into every single department meeting and I would say, okay, what's our strategy, guys? We are helping our customers mature and get better results. And that's all I would just keep repeating, right? But they realized that when we help them in these, few ways, right, to become better organizations at what they were doing, it was very repeatable and very scalable. And I think that is in the end what drives the efficiency, because you're then doing that same thing all the time. And you're not having to address every single problem. So I often would say, you're not trying to do, better than others. Just try to do better than yesterday. It's going to take time and we're going to get there. And, we're not going to set crazy aggressive goals every quarter. I was the one who came in and being like, no, let's be realistic here, right? We've got legacy customers where let's come back and ground this. And I use this whole bottoms up formula to be like, here, this is what's going to happen. And we're going to not be able to keep these customers, but these ones we will. And here's what's our renewal rate's going to be. So I knew that, was able to forecast that and manage the bottom line numbers so that was efficient to do. So you can't just be expecting to be the greatest CS team, right after doing this. It's just be better than yesterday. That's what you're trying to do. And that's what I think you just have to keep remembering.
I love this about watching how you lead. I feel like I learned a lot from this, because one of the things that I saw you doing that I think is hard to do from my own experience too, just is to keep it simple. What I'm convinced that one of the things that's happened with customer success in general is that we keep adding layers and layers and layers to it until it's just becomes so unthinkably, impractically complex. I'm expected to do everything and transform the affective happiness experience of every customer I have. I mean, it's not practical, and I think that contributes to this malaise, as does overly aggressive initiatives and goals and targets. And you were like, no, let's strip all that back. If our goal is to make our customers get results, then we don't have to focus on everything. We can just focus on a few things, which turns out to be the only practical thing to do anyway, because we don't have all that many resources. So I just thought that was really impressive, and in a way required, because I'm interested in your red account process that you mentioned, because here you're asking them to think about what account risk is in a totally different way. It's not when the customer says they're at risk. It's when we think they're not on track to get good results.
A customer doesn't even know. We would flag something and the customer is like happy, not complaining about anything, and they don't even know what's happening here. And we would be like, listen, guys, I think we want to schedule a QBR with you guys. We want to go through the results. We want to tell you where you're at and, help you for like the next phase of your strategy. And we would have to they were like, oh, really? Do we need this? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And it was often, it was difficult to do at times because the customer didn't even realize that there was anything going wrong. And in our minds, yes, something is going wrong.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting too, because they're confused why you feel like an intervention's necessary, but they're also not super defensive, because as far as they're concerned, things are fine. They're
so happy, and they feel great when you're proactive. They're like, wow, that's what I hired you to do. That's why we have you. It's like they acknowledge that, oh yeah, that's why we have you guys. It's the expertise, and then you're bringing that to the table.
Yeah. Totally. Well, that's interesting. And as your team kind of went through that experience where they were being asked by you to flag account as red, which was clearly a green account by any other definition, then there's this like, well, weird, I'm supposed to treat them like they're at risk. No, we're just getting ahead of the risk. That transformation in thinking, I felt like was a really big deal for your team. But it was
it's overwhelming at first, right? Because you have more, the red makes you feel like you have more fires, but the reality is they're not fires, right? They're not, it's nothing. Right. You usually have so much time. And so everyone would kind of get caught up on like, well, it's going to take me time to get this into green. No account is perfect. And if it took a month or it took 2 months, we've basically saved ourselves months of like heartache and churn by addressing it when we did. So it's just, I can't tell you how many actual fires we reduced by doing this, right? That was actually one of the hard things is, it's like changing an engine mid-flight when you're going from reactive to proactive, right? Because you have like so many fires in place. How do you just stop listening to the fires and then go to this process? That transition was even difficult, but we had to basically say, you know what, these ones, we can't even deal with them anymore. I'm sorry. We're going to churn. It's going to churn. I'm not going to go save it. We're not going to go call the CEO for this problem. It's it's done, it's too late. And then just go work on the other ones. And that was where we ripped off the Band-Aid, right? We just, we ripped it off. We stopped having, all those fires to address. And I know a lot of our leaders would say it was it was a relief to have all of that, to not have to worry about it, because you just knew, hey, they can't be successful. It's too late.
I love it. This is why I told you this probably a year ago, but I would love to work for you, because this is, and I know this is like a side topic, but I don't think it is. The malaise that exists in the CS world exists for a reason, and that is that we frequently feel like we can't win, we can only lose. The only outcome is churn or not churn, and I don't get credited for not churn, I only get dinged for churn. So what you were doing was unburdening the role, in a sense, by shifting the focus away from the loss to the save, to the win, to the focus on the proactive things I can do up front. And I feel like that's a big deal in CS. I feel like that a lot of teams suffer from just low morale because we haven't realized how a shift in focus, by taking away that burden, you called it a relief, well, we just know customers are going to get into trouble. We don't know who, but we're going to then have to work on that. 90% of the time they'll churn anyway. And then we'll get up the next day and do it again. It's very disheartening. And what you were saying is, no, what we do is really great. What we do is really powerful. It's really effective. And I feel like that dawned on your team over time, just how valuable it is, that sense of relief that we don't have to work on something which doesn't work.
It was honestly times like that where the CSM was grateful for the change. Like when they would come, they would escalate a fire, right, from a customer. And if I looked at that customer and I realized, wow, I mean, it's too late. You're renewing in 30 days. You can't make a change to your website. You can't do this, whatever it is, can't save you. And I would tell them, you know what? Apologize to the customer, and let's give them back a month of whatever, let them leave early. Don't worry about it. You can't spend your time on it because they're not set up to succeed. They're not going to get results. And that feeling was like, what? You don't want me to run the save playbook on them? No, no, you don't have to do that now.
It'll take all your time away from the customers you could save. One thing you mentioned was working with your sales team.
Yeah.
This is another thing that I think you uniquely brought to this whole position, was this sense of a sweeping knowledge of the whole landscape and how all of these different factors were contributing to outcomes in the success side. So, you worked with the sales team. They were very amenable to establishing what value meant to customers right from the beginning, what their results were.
And it may depend on your sales leader, but our sales leader, Tom, was very much into, hey, we've got to understand what the customer is trying to achieve and ensure that we have the solution that can help them get to their results. Very much aligned with that. So it was very well aligned to, what we would do on the CS side.
Well, and this is my question. My experience has been the same. Most good sales leaders are very anxious to engage in that. But the more I engaged with them in my own practice, the more I realized that I had failed them by not giving them enough insight and clarity as to what works and what doesn't work and how they should think about results, right? They're very happy to find out what the customer is trying to achieve, but they're not always as well informed. And I took this as a personal challenge as to what does work and why certain things are a better fit than others. And I don't know, in your experience, it did seem like from where I was sitting that you were able to inform that side with some additional thinking, like, for instance, this web engagement side, just examples of, here are things you can message to prospects that will help them see how not only they'll be a good fit, but also how they'll be able to succeed. My experience is if the sales side's doing that, then customers arrive much more open to, hey, tell me what I need to do to win, where the same customer might not have been if they weren't prepared that way. Were you able to give some of that insight about what works and what results are valuable and how to achieve them to your sales side? And how did they implement?
Absolutely. And they were able to, for the most part, implement a lot of them and make sure that they set the customer up right. But, sometimes, a customer will come in, right? And even though they've defined all these processes and the leaders are checking things and whatever, sometimes you get this customer in and you're like, how did this happen? This customer is not set up to succeed. And we still had those, right? But the great thing about having the red accounts is we would then flag it right away for the sales team. And you want to have a great relationship with your sales leadership so that you're able to take it back and say, whoa, guys, something happened here, but this customer is not set up to succeed, and we need to like rescope, right size, fix this, right? And we would still, and it was a lot more at first, and then it would dwindle down into a lot less because we started getting into the rhythm of bringing in the right types of customers. But oftentimes, a sales organization is driven by the revenue goals. Like they have very strict goals to hit, and they're going to hit them at all costs. So that may mean that they bring in sometimes the not so suitable customer. But if that happens and you flag it early enough, then, I think they address it. I think what happens is often it's flagged once it's churned and the customer churned, and then the CS organization will be like, well, you brought in the wrong customer. And that's not fair, right? That's like a year later. It's like, yeah, well, you serviced the wrong customer, right? Why did that all happen? It's doing it early, I think, that makes all the difference. And I think that the sales team really appreciates that. But I do think you're never going to, it's just like, you're never going to avoid churn. Churn's going to happen. You're never going to avoid bringing in those wrong customers. You're still going to have customers that aren't the right ones, not set up to succeed. And it's just your responsibility to bring it back and rescope it.
Yeah. And here's the other thing. I love your emphasis on taking responsibility. If you knew they were a bad fit, why did you only bring it up after they churned?
Yeah.
That smacks of self-serving. And we don't want to be there because we're generally not very self-serving. But let's avoid the appearance of it, right?
Yeah.
Can a customer be read on day one? Oh yeah, for sure they can. Absolutely. Happens all the time. That's not something to be terrified of or even mad about. It's a reality. And actually, partly it's why we exist, is to try to help those customers win anyway. And we take responsibility for that too, while also acknowledging they're not likely to win and they're set up badly. Still, we're going to do it, right? We know. And here's the thing. When I made that shift in my own practice, what I found was that there were more things I could solve for that I used to blame as fit problems than I thought. I was able to reduce the number of things that I was saying absolutely prevent a customer from succeeding. Yes, there's a list and there are things, but some of them that I had on my list, I actually found a way to solve for that or to help customers overcome that limitation. And so actually my list of fit problems went down. They're still there. There are still good reasons why some customers can't win. But can't win is different than likely won't. So one example is, I would always say, well, they don't have support from leadership. That's a fit problem. Well, is it a fit problem or is it just a behavior problem? And how could we help them develop? And in some cases, we were able to. And so over time, it's like, well, yeah, that's not a good setup, but I wouldn't say it's a deal killer. They can't ever win if they have that condition. And so my list went down. I don't know if that's something you experienced too.
Yeah. Executive buy-in was always a very hot topic. If you didn't have it, it meant that this customer would churn. But the reality was we had lots of customers that we had no executive buy-in, and they were using our platform year after year after year. But it's because they were getting results. And honestly, you'll get the buy-in from the executive if you're getting results. The executive doesn't care what technology or how you did to get it. You got the results. And that's what any good executive, any good leader cares about, right? They want to do the things that are going to get their team's results. So do you really need it? No. Is it nice to have? Absolutely. Right. But executives change all the time. And if you're just trying to get the buy-in of the executive, that's a temporary solution.
Yeah. And just because a client has some limitation like that doesn't mean they can't be a client. If that's true, I don't know what they need me for as a client success executive, because it's like, well, but that's why you're trying to help customers overcome their limitations. Like, how many customers have no limitations? Zero. You've just annihilated your business growth, right? So I do think we have to take it very seriously. And then in return, when we go to sales leaders and say, hey, seriously, we've drilled it down. These things are really important. These are the things we've tried and we can't solve for. Then they look at you like you're a serious partner, and they say, okay, that's
absolutely.
fair. That's fair.
And it's not like and even in our case, we were like, hey, it's these like 3 things when a customer is doing, we know that they're going to have success. That narrows your market, right? That narrows your target market, sometimes even too much. So they were like, no, we can't narrow it that far. But if you guys can help mature them and get these 3 behaviors, taught to the customer, then we can still bring them in and we'll just flag them like that. And that's how you can work with your sales team, because again, they don't want to narrow their market. I mean, they've got big goals to hit. So you just got to be working together where this is happening. And then it's your responsibility in CS to teach the customer how to do those.
I think that's a brilliant way to put it. I feel like that is such practical advice. The other thing I know you guys did, you did in particular, was to connect this to your marketing team, even to think about how do we message our value and what we do. Because honestly, there's almost nothing, and product too. I saw you tying all these pieces together and looking at the kind of insight and expertise you could share with other teams in the company. That's something I feel like you did just phenomenally well. Not just working on the things inside CS, but looking at the ways you could add value and insight to all these other teams. I mean, was that something that was just natural? I felt like it was natural for you as a former CEO and executive running everything, that obviously you would do that, right?
I don't know how many. I don't know. I guess if it was natural, but I guess it was. But I think what was enlightening to me is discovering those behaviors that, again, seem so intuitive, right? And to only focus on those was really so profound to me that I thought, if we didn't, like we had these success studies with these customers, so I'm like, if we don't, share this with everybody, that these are the things you need, and then you will be successful. Just do these things, right? You use our product and do these things. I mean, this is it. That's all. This is what it takes. If we had that information, we should just share it. So I was super excited to share it with the marketing team. They loved it. I mean, they like the idea of talking to successful customers. I mean, that's what marketing is all about, right? They always want to talk to successful customers. And since we had really studied them, we knew the behaviors, and they were used to talking about the technology successes. And we kind of reframed it into talking about, this is not just, yes, you had our product, but you customer did some great things, and we want to talk about that too. So they were really great at putting those things together. And then from a product perspective, I mean, I think our product managers were always very interested to do that. And they will talk to the customers who will talk to them, right? They'll talk to as many customers as well, but they often talk to the customers who are complaining about your product the most. Now, that's not to say that those aren't customers that will stay. Usually the customers who are complaining a lot are actually, they're super invested and will stay with you, but they're really focused on the product features. And what's interesting is when the product managers start to hear about the behavior things, they really think about it in a different way. They think, well, how can I enable that behavior better in the product? So even if it's something like, hey, so yeah, it makes sense that the web team needs to do this. Should we build a report that's applicable to the web team, and that will get them more engaged in it? And it's like, that's how they'll think about it, right? And I think that's what it would carry on. And a lot of our focus on the successes, I think, just drove the right behavior in a lot of areas of the business. We kind of took away the, focusing on the failures, and because that's really all we were doing before that.
Wanted to pop in, Greg. I'm so sorry. Wanted to pop in really quick. We just got 3 minutes, but there's been a question that's been asked several times now by people that I wanted to use the last 3 minutes maybe to ask you from the audience. And it relates to what you've just been talking about, which is these behavior changes, what your successful customers were doing. We have several questions asking, what were the behaviors that your customers were doing, or how did you identify those specific behaviors the customers had to make? Ultimately, from you interviewing your successful customers, what were the things that they needed to be doing that you could replicate to your other successful customers or to the rest of your customers?
So we essentially worked actually with Greg and team on studying our customers and really kind of investigating their history right? We would start from the beginning of when they got into the company. And we would just really want to know, okay, what was your day-to-day? What kinds of things did you do? How did you get to this goal? When did you first achieve your goal? What happened? What was the timing of it? And really just started to investigate those things. And we probably talked to 5-6 customers, and you don't need a lot, right? But in those 5-6 customers, we found something interesting that was a commonality between all of them. And whenever we found it, it was always something that, again, was very intuitive to us, but it was a critical behavior, meaning if you didn't do it, there is no way you could have success. And so one of those things that I talked about was, having a relationship with your web team. So that was a behavior. It was like, some of these successful customers we talked to would say, oh, I meet with my web team. We have a cadence every single month and I go through the changes. And we're like, you did what? Oh, I meet with my web team and we go through the changes, and it's like, okay. And they make the changes that you tell them. Yeah, they really, they trusted me. And, but we're like, well, how did you get that trust? Oh, well, one time the website broke and they were all looking for me, the one person who could try to figure out why we lost all of our, traffic. And they found me, and I helped them to fix it, and I got some credibility with them, and now they talk to me all the time. So we would that's like what the studying is and the investigating, because you're just kind of trying to get into it, right? So we started to realize that there were these things like that something would happen, but somehow you would get this great relationship with the customer or the web team, and that was just imperative. And if you didn't have a relationship, the web team gets questions from all parts of, you wouldn't even believe, not only do they get from, customers visiting the website, do they get issues and technical stuff, they get things from the CMO, the CIO, the CEO. They're getting some of the most amount of, issues they have to address. And they don't care about the one person who's like, well, this is going to affect your visits on Google. That didn't matter to the web team. So it was hard to get their attention. And just kind of spotting that in our conversations, we realized, hey, we got to help our customers make that relationship. And it may sound as simple as getting a meeting, but that was that important, getting that cadence meeting. So that's just kind of an example of one of them. And again, there's a difference between surveying. You can't, I don't think it's possible to just send out a survey and say, how did you, do you talk to your web team? How did you get that relationship with your web team? You wouldn't have known to ask that question, right? So it does take the studying, as Greg has said.
Well, it's a really great example. We're out of time. Selina, this has been phenomenal. I would love to do it again. Thank you so much for everything, and not least of which is what I've learned from you. And best of luck in all that you're doing now. And thanks for the session. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. All
right. Thanks, Matt. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Greg and Selina. Thanks to all our attendees and participants. Appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.